Hello, crafty friends. My name is Jessica, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I have a very fun, whimsical card for you using the original sets of the Distress watercolor pencils. I was inspired after the final sets were released here a few weeks ago, and I thought I would pull mine out after getting inspiration from hearing that there were more coming. So I have put my original 3 sets in rainbow color palette. This is just easier for me. And the way I like to paint with them is I like to soak them a little bit. This makes the ink easier to use. And then I'm doing this brush to tip technique so that I can get the color that I want. Like I'm showing there that I'm putting them in water. I have not found any issues by doing this. It just softens it so that I can get a better color transfer to my brush. The green colors I'm using here are Peeled Paint and Rustic Wilderness. This die is a Simon Says stamp die. It is the Laurel Leaves background plate, and I cut this out of Tim Holtz Distress Watercolor. I really enjoy this brand of watercolor because it's bright white, and I like the results that you get when using the Distress line with it. So I'm doing a really loose watercolor technique, just ensuring that I'm creating some dimension by using the rustic wilderness to darken the leaves in various areas. I'm not following any kind of light source, just trying to create a little bit of difference in between them. I'm also using a water brush pen. And for my water brush pens, I do not put water in them. I just use them like a typical brush because I find when I put water in them that I don't have a lot of control on the amount of water that comes onto the brush. So that's what I'm doing, just building these layers up, darkening as the paint dries and seeing where it needs to be a little bit darker and just ensuring that I get paint all over this panel. This is also the first time that I'm using my waffle flower grip mat when watercoloring, and it's working really, really well. Typically, I would have normally used a stick and stamp mat, but this will allow my die cut to come off easier since my stick and stamp mats are pretty new. They tend to hold on to the paper just a little bit more until you get them broken a little bit. So I'm loving the technique with using this waffle flower mat and the ability that it still holds the paper, but it's not going to like cling to it. I had a lot of fun while creating this card using these distress pencils, and it definitely will not be the last time. It has been a while since I've used them, and I've really enjoyed getting them out of their cupboard and laying them onto some paper. I will probably be buying the next trio set when I can, and I'm excited to expand and have all of the colors in my possession. So here again, peeled paint and rustic wilderness. Just going to go ahead. I use a paper towel to wipe the tips off and then put them back in. And voila, here's the background panel. Very loose watercolor technique, not focusing on making sure that I'm accurate with my light source or anything. Now a quick clean using Squeaky Clean from Brutus Monroe, and we're on to the next set of die cuts. For this one, we're using the mushroom stems from Simon Says Stamp. I love the shape of these mushrooms. They very much make me think of Alice in Wonderland, and I'm really excited on how I paint them. You'll see here in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and get Crackling Campfire and Candied Apple sitting in the water just to kind of loosen up the pigment. We're going to get a new paper towel and get started. I'm going to use the Crackling Campfire and the base, and then we're going to go over into the red to create the red tops of those mushrooms. Those poisonous red ones that you see a lot are so fun, but they are poisonous, but it's fun to recreate them because they are so bright and lush. So I wanted the die picture over on the right there so that you can see how these mushrooms are layered. I went ahead and did the red caps on the top, but then we're going to go and do some lighter colors down below so that you create that white flesh underneath the cap. For the fleshy part, we are using Tattered Rose and Rusty Hinge. And I'm going in with the Tattered Rose. And notice how I'm not going all the way up to the top. That's because we're going to be gluing the red cap on top. So there's no need to go ahead and waste the pigment and getting the paper overly wet in order to color the whole thing. So we're going in with Tattered Rose and then we're accenting with that Rusty Hinge to create a shadow. So I'm making the tops of the stems a little bit darker and the bottom of the mushroom caps. Again, we're going in with a very loose watercolor, not really paying attention to being precise, just very fun and loose. So that's the mushrooms. We'll go ahead and we'll take these off to let them to continue to dry. And then we're going to do a quick clean and move on to the most favorite part of this card is the florals. I really enjoy these florals because I chose really bold colors and I love the way that they turned out and the way that they work with the red mushrooms and the green laurel leaves. So this is this die set that we're using. This is from Simon Says Stamp called Gentle Blooms, and it is a builder. We're just going to be using those top florally bits. We're not going to be using the leaves. And the colors that we're going to choose today are Seedless Preserves and Villainous Potion. I'll pull those out here in a minute for an up close. There they are. We're going to go ahead and use Villainous Potion to create the dark parts of the florals, doing the larger sections. And then we're going to go in and add the Seedless Preserves as an accent color. Now, this color went on pretty light for what I wanted, so I'm just making sure that I get more pigment on my brush, and then I'll go back over and make sure that they're brightening up those background panels. Here we are adding the seedless preserves, and I love this color combo. So fun. And this is going to be a great accent color on this bright green and red mushroom card. So here I am just adding some more color. I didn't like how light that those panels were. And then we're going to add some more seedless preserves. There's something to be said about doing this loose watercolor technique. For me, it made me not have to be concerned about light sources and allowed me to be more free and really just sit back and let my creativity flow. Now, for the little die cuts, we're going to do the same color combo. The nice thing about this technique is you don't need distress colored pencils to create this look. You could very easily use watercolor or opaques to create the same exact effect. But I'm having a lot of fun using these pencils the way that I am. Now, I did notice that these were drying back a little bit lighter, so I'm just going back in to ensure that I have the most pop in color on these leaves. I really want them to stand out. Now that I have them right where I want them, we're going to do a quick cleanup. I always wipe the tips of the pencils off and put them away. And then here we are. These are the leaves. I'm going to go ahead and let everything dry, and then I'm going to glue everything together. So here I am just looking, just making sure that I didn't want to use the leaves from that floral set, but I did know that I wanted to pop up that leafy laurel background. So I went ahead and off camera die cut 2 additional panels out of some 110 Neenah cardstock in order to create some dimension with these dies. And I'm just going to go ahead and layer them up. I fiddle with it a lot. Having all of these little projections that aren't connected can be a little bit challenging when you're gluing the layers together. But thankfully, what I do is I just squish them together from the sides, and this helps line them up when you do it throughout the die cuts. So while that is adhering, I'm going to go ahead and assemble my mushrooms. I struggled a little bit because they were still a little bit damp. I didn't want to put the heat dryer to them, and that affected the way that the glue did, but eventually they end up going together. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth, giving time for the die cut to have the glue be pressed down by those stamping blocks. So now I'm just finishing up the laurel leaves, and then I will jump back over and finish the mushrooms. I always like to press these blocks down just to ensure that we're getting the most pressure to push the glue to all the little crevices that it needs to be in. I absolutely love how these mushrooms turned out, but I'm going to take them one step further, and you'll see that a little bit later. Once we have the mushrooms all adhered, we're going to move on to the florals. Because this paper is still a little bit wet, I'm giving it some extra time because the glue is struggling to adhere to that wet paper. So here I'm just doing another fiddle, pushing it back on, and then we're going to give it some time underneath this block to continue to glue together. So because I'm noticing that the glue is not adhering to the other die cuts that we've done very well, I have a solution for these little florals. I'm going to use my reverse tweezers. I absolutely love these tweezers, but they're going to go ahead and put some pressure on these florals without me having to. So I'm going to go ahead and use the long end of the tweezers to create that pressure. And I'm going to go ahead and do this for a little bit, get it started, and then we'll move to adding a block once I felt like the mushrooms were done. So we're going to continue to do this, gluing them together using the Barely Art glue and giving them time and a little bit of pressure to get completely adhered. Building these florals are so fun. I absolutely love the way that they came out, having those dark villainous potion sections along with that seedless preserves. Another fun way that you could do these die cuts without having watercolors or distress crayons would be to use colored paper and your inks to create these different dimensions. So there's lots of opportunities for adding color to these die cuts to get the same effect. If you wanted a very bright, vibrant color, you could even use reinkers, squishing little drops out onto maybe some acetate and using a paintbrush to add them to the die cuts would give you a very similar loose watercolor feel. So now we're just wrapping up the last little die cuts here, gluing them all together. We're going to go ahead and be sure to put your pin in your glue so that it doesn't clog. And we're going to do that final step to these mushrooms. I wanted to add some splatter. So I'm getting out my Liquitex white paint, and I'm using a fan brush and a little bit of water just to loosen up that paint a little bit, and then flicking it on to my die cuts. I'm also going to be using black, and I reuse my boxes from my orders in order to do little splat boxes. And then sometimes I get a little overspray and I just clean that up. But the fan brush and the right consistency with these paint have given me some really fine splatters, and I absolutely love the way that it looks. Even though I got a little bit of white runs on one of the mushroom, I just love the handmade feel that it gives. Now, I did get splatter all over my hands, so that if you're not somebody who enjoys getting inky, be sure to use gloves or wash your hands right away. So now I'm just looking and I'm thinking that I wanted a blue background instead of adding it to a white. So I'm using a blue cardstock from my supply and this seafoam ink from Simon Says Stamp to create a little bit of an ombre halo around this to look like the sky. So I'm going darker at the top and then showing there how it's all going to look together. I added more ink until I was happy with it. By creating this background panel, we're just adding another layer of depth and it really brings the card together. Now we're going to go ahead and use some dot runner and adhering it to the card base, and then we're going to build the card. We're going to start with that panel, and I'm going to just make sure that I like the dark color up at the top versus the light color. I had a little bit of my pink tape stuck to the back of the die, so I did remove that so that we could get good adherence with the glue. And then we're going to go ahead and use Gina's Connect glue to add this panel to the card base. And I'm adding some extra pressure with my hands, and then I'm adding an extra block just to be on the safe side to ensure that there's lots of pressure to get that background panel to adhere. Then I'm using my tweezers to go in and scoop up all of the loose glue that has seeped out from the underneath the die cut. And now we're just going to build. I'm adding the little florals right to the background of the leaves, making it look like they are meant to have flowers on them. And then I'm focusing the mushrooms down in that right hand corner. This is me just fiddling to ensure that I have the right amount of die cuts on the panel and everything feels balanced. It's definitely something that I have just learned over time to a feeling that I get when I know that it's enough. Now, for the most part, this is going to be a one layer card, meaning that I'm using liquid glue to adhere everything down. But I wanted to create this one mushroom to stand up just a little bit, just the mushroom cap, so that it gives us the layered effect here that they're sitting in front of each other. But everything else, I use glue to adhere these down. So here I am just going in, adding glue to the backs of everything and not being super careful. I'm getting a little bit of over glue, but that's okay. I think I go in and wipe it up, but if not, it obviously doesn't affect the final product. So once I have everything glued down, oh, yep, here I am using my tweezers to go ahead and get that over glue. If I was a little bit more careful, I wouldn't have had to do that. But there we are. I'm happy. And then I realize it probably needs just a little bit more right there. Why not? I have them made, might as well add them. So now that the card is all glued together, we're going to go and work on a sentiment and some embellishments. With the complexity of this card, with the bright colors and all the added floral die cuts, I wanted to keep the sentiment really simple. So I'm using this really thin What's Up Bestie reverse sentiment from Simon Says Stamp. The trick I like to do with these is to use a marker to shade the edges so that it looks more uniform when you glue it on. I wanted to pop this sentiment up, so I'm using a Simon Says Stamp phone strip and just kind of eyeballing where I wanted it. I liked it there just right underneath that mushroom. So I'm going to actually add a little bit of liquid glue to give it a little bit more adhesive ability. And then we're going to add some gems. I'm loving these green, pretty pink Posh spring green jewels. And we're just going to go in with the 3 to 2 kind of method that I like to follow. So I usually do 2 jewels on one corner and then I do 3 on the other because odds are better when you're doing jewels like this than even numbers. It's just more pleasing to the eye. And that's the card for today. I appreciate you being here. Be sure to leave me a comment on if you like the Distress Color pencils. Take care.